Hello, you're listening to A Conversation With, the podcast where each week I'm joined by a different guest and we have a conversation on the topic of their choice. My name is Jason, and this week I'm being joined by a guest from LC's Comic Corner. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Luke. I am a host of LC's Comic Corner, which is a comic podcast. We just talk about comics.
So, Luke, please tell us a topic that we're going to be speaking about today.
So I'm going to be talking about a comics publisher called Valiant Comics.
Valiant Comics.
My favourite publisher.
So your favourite publisher. Yeah. Now, we've had a comics book episode, I think it was episode 5, where we spoke about Marvel Comics. And I think the majority of people listening are probably aware of Marvel with the movies and TV shows and the books and a lot of merchandising. And that episode was actually done by Harry, who I believe you know. Yeah,
Harry's one of the co-hosts of LC's Comic Corner. So if you did like that episode and this episode, then you should like LC's Comic Corner, hopefully.
But from what I've understood from also your appearance on his other podcast, the Rank List of Everything, you guys seem to have a disagreement about which publisher is the best.
Yeah, so he's what I like to call a Marvel fanboy, where he doesn't read anything that he'll hardly read anything that isn't published by Marvel. Whereas I like to dabble more in a lot of different publishers.
So I think the main two are obviously Marvel and DC.
Yeah,
and I think your average man on the street has heard of, if not the publisher, then a number of the characters, let's put it that way. Valiant Comics, probably, I'm going to speak for the audience, majority never heard of them. So
yes, that's fair.
What can you tell us then about, if you had to just kind of quickly plug Valiant Comics, or Valiant Entertainment, isn't it, I think is the...
So Valiant Comics, so when it was originally called Valiant Comics, was published in the 90s, where they started publishing in the 90s, and they actually started off with licensed characters that weren't their own. They bought the license for these characters from the Gold Key universe, one of which I think is quite well known, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, if you heard of him.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him probably through a video game, would that be fair to say? Maybe
there was a long run in,
I want to say series. Nintendo 64 era maybe was the first time.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, well, going back.
And then the other two major Gold Key characters were Solar Man of the Atom, or Solar Man of the Atom, however you want to pronounce it, and Magnus Robot Fighter. So they were quite big characters at the time that they'd got their hands on. But obviously, you can't create your own universe based on someone else's characters, so they had to bring in their own characters.
So what were some of the characters that they then created themselves?
So I believe the first one was actually, it might have been a character called Rai, who was this enhanced ninja from the future, from the year 4001 AD. And then not long after that, they created a character called Exo Manowar, who is probably now Valiant's biggest character. He's their flagship character, that is generally the most popular character as well. He is essentially a barbarian that gets the most advanced suit of armor of this alien armor that's also sentient. It's symbiotic, and then gets transported to modern times. So he's a barbarian with the thing that I love about the concept of him. He's the most primitive man with the most advanced technology.
Yeah,
I think that's a cool concept.
Yeah,
but there's also characters. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say. Obviously, you're saying it's like an advanced suit of armor. So, the one that would jump maybe immediately to mind for most people, advanced suit of armor. You're thinking kind of your Iron Man character, but he is obviously very intelligent. And you're saying this guy, on the other hand, it's kind of barbarian, but with better tech than Tony Stark would have.
Exactly. If he went head to head with Iron Man, he'd probably just obliterate Iron Man.
Would Harry agree with that statement?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that objectively, because his suit is impenetrable.
Yeah.
Almost it makes him almost invincible. Whereas Iron Man made out of metal, so it's
yeah. Spoilers for Infinity War, but if anybody's seen that, they know that not quite indestructible suit.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, sorry. When I get going about my school, so there was actually. It's funny that you mentioned the parallel to Iron Man because there was actually a video game in the 90s called Iron Man Exo Manowar Iron Man and Exo Manowar in heavy metal.
Right.
And it was like a crossover game between Iron Man and Exo Manowar. And there was actually a comic, these two comics that tied in with it as well.
Okay.
From what I've heard of the game, it's not very good.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but I want to get it. I want to get my hands on it because, as a fan.
Yeah, what was it on?
PS1, one of the Nintendo ones. I don't know which one.
Oh wow! So going back a while, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Was it? Did it come out in the UK or only?
Yes, you can get it in the UK.
Because I have a feeling that I've seen it. Because I used to work in a games shop, and it was in the PS1 era as well. And I just have a feeling like I've seen the cover of the game.
Well, that'd be really cool, actually, if you have. Then you've actually had some exposure to Valiant that you didn't know about.
Well, that's true.
You didn't realise at the time. So anyway, there was other characters like Bloodshot, who is a man who has nanites in his blood. It makes him he can regenerate and enhance himself physically, run faster and get stronger and stuff like that. There's characters like Ninjak, who is a ninja. That's pretty much it. He's an English ninja who works for MI6.
An English ninja. Brilliant.
English ninja, exactly. So, ultimately better because it's English.
Wonderful. Sorry, any of our listeners from anywhere else in the world.
From anywhere else. There were characters like Shadow Man, who had voodoo stuff that made him into this guy who's more powerful at night and stuff. But yeah, there was all these cool characters.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you're I feel it might be a bit unfair on the part of on Valiant's behalf, I suppose, because obviously you say, this character, he's kind of enhanced, so he can run slightly faster, he's a bit stronger, and people probably again draw parallels to so it's a bit like Captain America but with this kind of twist, or this character, he's a bit like Iron Man but with this. But really, that's all comic book characters, because
exactly.
in DC and Marvel you're going to find parallels, or you go across to Image or creator-owned comics, and there's going to be a Superman archetype, a Batman archetype. It's always going to be there's only so many powers you can give a person. But I suppose the difference is that as we saw in the Marvel episode, and maybe in the future or a DC episode we might get, just because those companies have been around for so long, people sort of give it a pass. They're like, he's been around forever. This is a new guy, and he's just copying this one's powers or something like that. I kind of feel like that's the struggle that Valiant, I suppose, has to go against.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably part of it. The thing is nowadays, it's very rare that something is actually an original idea. Everything is a remix of something else. And in my opinion, when it comes to comics, it's not about who did it first, it's about who did it better. And that's how it should be with anything, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because I suppose there are characters, again, from Marvel or DC that you can get very technical and say, well, this one appeared 6 months before in a Marvel book, and so DC stole him. And you're like, yeah, but you didn't do anything with him, and now he's the main player in the DC universe, and vice versa. A Marvel character that is the spitting image of a DC character, but again, been used in a better way. Quite often it's just getting one good writer behind it and telling a good story, and then people follow it. Are there any good names to follow that are writing Valiant comics at the moment?
Well, currently writing Valiant comics, there's some people who kind of made their name at Valiant and went on to do bigger things, have you heard of Robert Venditti?
Yeah.
Obviously he writes a bunch of Green Lantern stuff now. He started at Valiant with the 2012 reboot, but I feel like I should give a bit of context first, because I'm still stuck in the 90s.
Yeah, let's go back. So we're in the 90s.
So towards the end of the 90s, Valiant was actually bought out by a company called Acclaim,
right?
Who were a video games company, so they became Acclaim Comics. And
would that be the time that the game came out, the one you mentioned?
Yes,
because I have a feeling that I've seen it with the Acclaim logo.
Yes, probably, because it is an Acclaim game. They've all of the classic like Valiant character games are Acclaim games.
Yeah,
and that's why they bought Valiant, because they wanted to turn them into video games.
So it's very similar to what like a company like Disney did with Marvel, or Warner Brothers with DC, that you kind of pick up this property and you've got a number of characters you can use. But obviously, instead of films, like you're doing it with video games.
It's a bit like that, except also it was a little bit more like when Disney bought Marvel, they were like, the comics are fine, we'll keep them how they are, whatever, but we also want to adapt them into films. Whereas when Acclaim brought out Valiant, they completely rebooted everything and changed it all, and changed like the idea of core characters to make them fit a video game better, which ultimately is why people hate the Acclaim era. Mostly.
Right. So it wasn't a good buyout.
No, not in the general consensus anyway. So I mean, I don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool. It's very like 90s, very cheesy. But I from what I've read of some of their comics, it's all right. Like, it's not terrible.
Yeah, could be worse.
Exactly.
So the way you're speaking, I assume they don't own it any longer. So what happened next?
No, so they went bankrupt. I think they went bankrupt anyway. Don't hold me to that. But I think it was 2005, the properties got sold off.
Right.
And two students ended up buying them. A man named Dinesh Shandasani and I think it's Jason Kathari.
Okay.
And they took these. They were fans of the 90s characters, so they took them, kind of built up over the next 7 years. Like built up what they were going to do, and then completely rebooted the Valiant universe as a Valiant Entertainment, which is like the current Valiant. So if you see a book on the shelf, then that would probably be a Valiant Entertainment,
all right,
kind of thing. And Valiant Entertainment is amazing. This is where Valiant, like, the 90s stuff is all cheese, but the current Valiant is what, like, I love.
Right. So
I'm obsessed with.
That could be, again, sort of people that maybe took a look in the 90s or took a look a while ago and said, well, let me see what this, what the competition is doing, dove in, had a little look, I don't really like this, and moved back to their usual books. You're saying that's the kind of person that really needs to give it another chance, have a look at the new stuff, and probably you're going to find something that appeals to you.
I think that, because I did this, so I know from experience, back when I first got into comics, I was like, I want Marvel, I want DC, nothing else. I don't care what else there is, don't want it. And that includes like Image or anything like that. Like, I was like, nah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the story for most people, isn't it? Just because it's exactly the easiest to get hold of. If you're not, say if somebody's not comfortable to be going into their local comic book shop, they're possibly going to pick up some trades online or somewhere, and it's the amount that you can find of Marvel and DC. And it's also that recognition, even if you don't know anything about a character, you've probably seen their picture on a t-shirt or somewhere, and you're like, well, okay, I know this one, he's famous, I'll get his book.
Exactly.
I suppose that's again the battle that the Valiant's got. So, like, with regards to movies, because that's, I suppose, what's giving this big boom to the comic book industry at the moment. There's a lot of people that are picking up comics for the first time because they've enjoyed, I'd love to say comic book movies in general. As a DC fan, I'd love to say that, but unfortunately I have to say probably they've enjoyed the Marvel Cinematic Universe a lot more than the DC ones, although I saw an image of the Shazam movie today. That looks good.
It does, yeah.
But I should say Captain Marvel, but then I'll throw people off.
Yeah, exactly.
But Valiant, I've not heard of a Valiant movie being out. Is there anything in the works that you know about?
So there is. Talking about buyouts, a company, it's actually a film company, this year, 2018, actually ended up taking over Valiant completely. It's still the same, Valiant. They're continuing the continuity, so they're not doing what Acclaim did. Right. But they did it with because DMG is a film, I think they're a film production company. So they did that in the hopes of getting these made into films.
Okay, so this is much more similar to the Disney Marvel relationship.
I believe so.
Than the
some fans
would
tell you differently.
All right. Well, we're not talking to them.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a web series, an official web series that was done by a company called Bat in the Sun. They do a series on YouTube called Superpower Beatdown. If you've seen that, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they made a 6-episode web series called Ninjak vs. the Valiant Universe. Right. And if you're not a fan of Valiant, it probably won't make you a fan of Valiant. But if you are a fan, it's quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I see that there again. We fall into the kind of, I guess I'm going to say promotional bias of Marvel and DC against Valiant. I'm really feeling sorry for Valiant at the moment. I'm taking their side in a lot of this because you mentioned this company, Bat in the Sun, and numerous times that's like popped up in my kind of suggested video feed. For as you say, like Batman versus this person, or Wolverine and somebody. Never have I seen a Valiant thing from them pop up in kind of a you might enjoy this. And considering that's actually, as you said, like a 6-part series over a one-off video, you'd think that would be what you'd promote more, if that makes sense. But this is, I want to say, the first I'm hearing of it, so I don't know what that says. Probably nothing. Yeah, it's just the YouTube algorithm, but even YouTube seems to be against them.
Well, I mean, technically, it was released by them on comicbook.com, but it is on YouTube, right? Like people have put it on. So that might be why.
Okay. So I guess I've never actually gone to their website or anything. I've just seen it often. Their little logo popping up on YouTube, so that'll probably be why. But okay, so sorry, you're saying, so this company's bought them. They had this web series,
and a couple of years ago as well. So Ninja vs. Valiant University web series, it had a bit of trouble on release. Like it was supposed to come out back in 2017, and it didn't. It kept getting delayed, and most fans think this is because a few years ago a deal was signed with Sony, a 5-picture deal, where they would do a Bloodshot film, a Harbinger film, a second Bloodshot film, a second Harbinger film, and then a Harbinger Wars film, which would like tie both of them together in a climactic conclusion.
That sounds very Sony, doesn't it?
Yes.
We've already
really
agreed for 2 films and 2 sequels. We've not released any of them yet, but we're very confident because our track record is so good. What could go wrong? I have a feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I've heard probably on a podcast somewhere that Vin Diesel was linked to one of these. Is that me just imagining it, or that did happen?
Vin Diesel is playing Bloodshot. And that actually starts filming on August the 6th this year, so soon.
Next month, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And I wasn't happy about the casting of Vin Diesel first. You listen to Weekly Planet, right?
Yes.
He's an egg in a vest.
Yeah.
So,
just today, someone was saying, because on Netflix they've released like, I think the first 5 Fast and the Furious movies. They've just put them up on Netflix, and a friend of mine was saying, I'm watching all the Fast and the Furious movies, and I'm just sad because each one I see Vin Diesel just getting slightly larger and rounder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So poor guy.
But to be fair to him, I've seen it like on social media. He's been putting in a lot of work, and he's got into like decent shape for the role. So, I'm quite optimistic about it now. I'm excited, and anything Valiant, obviously, I'm going to be all over. I just hope it's good and that Sony don't ruin it, basically.
Yeah, that's always the risk, isn't it? Sony not really knocking it out of the park with their comic book movies
exactly
as of late. So I don't know how to feel about that. Anyway, only time will tell. But that's still all going ahead then. They've got there's no I mean, I don't know if it would. I didn't know if there would be any issue with the sort of deals they've struck with Marvel, in recent years. If that was going to cause any kind of conflict
unrelated.
Does that mean we could get Valiant comics characters popping up in the Venom movie or the which I can't remember what the other ones they've announced now for Sony. But
Silver Sable and Black Cat. I know that.
Yeah,
that one.
I feel like I heard that got cancelled very recently before it even got going. Yeah. Anyway,
I don't know if I'd hate that one. Valiant crossing over with Marvel characters. I'm not sure if I'd hate that.
Yeah. I think it would just confuse people even more.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. But, Bloodshot. Who's he? Let's go find a Marvel comic with Bloodshot.
I can imagine that. And I can imagine somebody giving them a comic and saying, it's this guy. Yeah, he's in the background there. You can see him. And it'll be some B-list, C-list Marvel character that just sort of said, oh, he looks a bit like him. He looks a bit like... I've just seen a picture of him. He looks a bit like maybe mix Cable with Colossus or something like that.
Well, a lot of people tend to compare him, in powers anyway, like the way he is, to a combination of Punisher and Wolverine. Like the tenacity and like the use of weaponry and guns and that, as of like Punisher, and then like the regeneration and that kind of stuff of Wolverine. But looks wise, he's just like very pale, red circle, nice chest.
So, are there any other? Because it sounds like all the characters are quite, I want to say, action heavy, kind of very. Is there something else within the universe, or is it very much? Just because I feel like, especially in recent years, probably one of the strong points of Marvel, I suppose. Don't quote me on that. It's being recorded, but don't quote me. Is sort of their attempts to say, well, look, here we've got a character that could appeal to this kind of person, and here we've got a character that's going to appeal to classic fans, and this is a new character we've just brought in, and they're going to appeal to kind of a younger audience. Do you have that similar variety within Valiant, or is it a little bit more, if you like Valiant, you like this kind of thing? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think they pride themselves on having a variety of genres.
Right.
So, because I've listened to like interviews with like higher ups naturally and stuff like that. So there's books like X-Manimal, which is like a sci-fi space type book, because obviously the suit and everything.
Yeah. And
then you've got Bloodshot, which is more like classic like action type thing. You've got books like Quantum and Woody, which is a comedy.
Right.
There is books like there's a book called Valiant High, which is like all the Valiant characters, but they're in high school. It sounds terrible, but I've heard it's actually really good. So I haven't read it yet.
Wow. So you will read it.
Oh, of course. But there's characters like Rai, which is like a futuristic type cyberpunk kind of thing. What else is there? There's like Archer and Armstrong, which is like a buddy comedy, like romp type thing.
So there is quite a variety for people to kind of dip in and test the waters and try a few different things. I have a feeling like, because I again listening to different podcasts and hearing different people speak about it, they do quite a number of sort of big events. As well, even at Valiant, because that's kind of one of the things that comic books have done a lot of recently, for better or worse, depending on who you ask. A lot of these kind of big, especially when you think of like Marvel, it seemed to have been every other week that it was sort of put aside the story that's going on in that book, because now everybody's invited to this big party, and it's just sort of almost forcing you to go out and buy 700 different books just to follow along a tiny part of an event. But I think are Valiant also doing these kind of bigger stories where they're in really building it as a universe where everything is linked and people are connected, or is it less that? Are they doing it better than Marvel?
So this is one of the things I love about them. Firstly, they do an event every year.
Right.
So every year there's one event, but it's normally quite self-contained. So for example, there is in the first year, when they rebooted in 2012, both Harbinger and Bloodshot, the series, were leading to this event called Harbinger Wars, which is vaguely what the film thing would be based on. But you could read just Harbinger and get that whole story, including the crossover, because it's not like it's, oh, stop what you're doing so we can do this. It's, this is where your story was headed. It's part of the thing. And vice versa, you could read all of Bloodshot and it'd be fine. Or you could do what I did and read it all, and either way you do it, it'll work.
Right.
The thing I liked about Harbinger Wars specifically is you had the event book Harbinger Wars, which tells the story, kind of the most important parts of the story, from like a viewer's perspective, not from anyone's perspective, from yours. Then Harbinger Volume 3 is what were the Harbinger characters specifically doing during this, and it kind of it works on its own, but it also works to enhance the event book itself.
Right.
And Bloodshot also did that same thing.
Okay.
So it's like you don't have to read it, but if you do, it will all come together, like, and kind of improve.
Yeah, so it's just giving you a little bit more information, so you're a bit more informed, but it's not the vital information that you need. Because I think that's one of the things that. So to be honest, I'm not really reading any comics at the moment. Just time, life, money, many issues. But the thing I did find was, like, you know, with Marvel Comics, at times they tell you, you know, this issue takes place after issue 7 of this book, so don't read this first. Well, issue 7 of that book's not coming out till next week. So I've got a book that I can read and maybe not really understand why they're in this situation, or I just have to put on the side and wait until next week to maybe buy a book that I don't really want, but the book that I do really want, I can't read it because it's not going to make any sense. And then, like, I'm a completist, so if I've got book 1, 2, and 3, I need 4. I can't just get 5 and 6. You know, I can't say, well, this one doesn't really matter. It's an event tie-in, so I'll skip that and get another one. So the idea that, well, look, you don't even need to read the other ones. Just read the one you're reading. And if you want to pick up this other special book that's going to be only, you know, 3 issues or 6 issues or whatever, you're not investing another year of a certain book. It sounds like a better concept, maybe, that wouldn't be as frustrating.
It allows more, I think, a bit more choice.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you favour this character, just follow their story. Whereas with, also they'll have a whole story arc, so it'll be like a whole volume of a trade or whatever, 4 issues or whatever. Whereas with a lot of, like, the big 2 crossovers, they'll have like one tie-in issue that's just randomly placed into this longer run, and it kind of takes you out of the ongoing story of that series, I feel like.
I definitely agree with that. There's nothing more frustrating than kind of, especially if they're leaving it almost on a cliffhanger, the previous one. I mean, like, I can't wait to see. And then, you know, that classic sort of tagline of, this book takes place 2 weeks before, and, well, hold on a second, you know, I need to know if he was going to survive this or what was going to happen there. And now, especially because it might sound to the listener that we're saying, well, hold on, you know, what's the problem? You'll read the next book. But at times these books are coming out once a month. So if you've read it, you've waited 1 month, you've bought the next one. It doesn't talk about the story you've been reading for the last couple of months, but speaking about something else. And now you've got to wait another month again to get closure on what happened 2 months ago.
Exactly.
And if you're reading anything in between, by the time you get there, you kind of I have to go back and reread the one of 2 months ago because you just can't remember why that happened.
Yeah.
I think that was the problem when Harry asked me if there was, like, any Marvel story arcs that I liked. And I was thinking they've all, like, blurred together over the course of reading these books. Yeah.
Understandably. I just want to touch on something you said a little bit ago, highlighted another thing that I, like, kind of respect about Valiant, when you said about, they'll release this book and then you can't read that until this other book has come out, but that doesn't come out for like 2 weeks or whatever. Valiant, they plan like a year or two ahead, so they know exactly when this is going to be, and this is going to be, and this is going to be, so they can make sure it is all together at the same time, and that it all makes sense. And I like that. I like the thought that, because also they don't release loads of books a month. They'll release between like 7 and 12, so not a lot compared to like the big two. That's not.
Yeah, I was going to ask, sort of, how many kind of titles do they have running at the moment?
So,
like more or less ballpark figure. Don't worry about.
So I won't count specifically. I think it's around 8, 9.
Yeah,
I think
so quite. I mean, relatively. If you think of like when. Probably the easiest way to count like DC was when they did the new 52, and they were like, we're going to release 52 new books. I mean, that's a huge number of books to release in one go. And I mean, yeah, it's true that that's divided over the course of a month. It's still a huge number of books, and then to try and coordinate when everything is coming out, and especially when you've got to think that people are, drawing these stories and writing the story. It's not as easy as doing a podcast.
Exactly.
It takes a bit more effort than this.
And the thing is with that, one of the things that attracted me to Valiant in the first place is, like, the big two can be quite daunting for people. They don't know where to start. There's so many books. Like, if I wanted to read Batman, and I wanted to read everything Batman, I'd have to pick up like 8 books a month.
Yeah.
Whereas with Valiant, 8 books a month is like the whole universe. You can stay up to date with the whole thing. And obviously, I'm a trade reader mostly, so I'll pick them up in trade. I don't keep up to date with the singles, but again, I've gone back and started from the 2012 reboot and read everything since then, and I'm about halfway through doing that, so I'm not caught up yet with the current stuff. But like, I'm able to do that. I don't I couldn't afford to do that with one of the big two. I'm able to. Because it's a small universe, I can read every single thing they put out, which, by the way, the majority of what they put out is very high quality. Really great storytelling, really great art. Like, you wouldn't expect it, but it is. And I'm able to do that because they keep it contained. They focus more on quality than quantity, which is really important, I think, and something, maybe that's a lesson that DC or Marvel could take from Valiant. Quality ultimately is better than quantity.
Yeah, I suppose with DC and Marvel, they've sort of painted themselves into a corner where they've got so many characters. They need to, everybody is somebody's favorite character. So
yeah,
we can't drop this one. We can't drop. It's like when they dropped the Fantastic Four again because of possibly. Movie studio issues with Fox and things like that, and not wanting to sort of promote something that they couldn't do a movie of. There was quite a bit of outcry, but
yeah,
personally, I was like, oh, who cares about the Fantastic Four? They don't. Yeah, they don't interest me very much at all. But for many, oh no, they're the first family. We love them, and I suppose they've got this issue where they've got so many characters, and they don't give any of them maybe like a cooling period where they say, well, we'll just leave them for a year or 2 years. And even if you went, not going back to read everything DC, but just pick one character, like, pick Batman, try and go back and read everything of Batman. You're going more than 75 years.
Exactly.
And and then, okay, you get to this point and they, reset the timeline. So you can ignore the stuff before that. Oh, but then jump ahead a few years and they've brought back in stuff from that rebooted do you know what I mean? So you can't just dismiss everything because you never know when it's going to come back into being relevant. So the idea that you can actually read not just one character's arc from the beginning, but an entire universe from the beginning, I suppose that would have a lot of appeal, particularly to new comic book readers. But I have a feeling, did they win some awards in the last couple of years, Valiant? I feel like I saw their name popping up a little bit.
I know a series, X-Men Award 2017, so the one that started in 2017, I know that won some awards for like best new series, best writer, something like that. I think Matt Kintz, the writer of that run, might have won like an Eisner or something. Or he was at least so that, they do get noticed in award stuff as well. But going back to the just quickly the number of books they actually publish, it is a bit of a double-edged sword because there's characters like X-Man or Bloodshot, Ninjak, like big characters who will always have a book out because those are the biggest Valiant characters, so that they'll sell most. But there are other characters that are quite popular, but don't get focused on as much because they don't really have room for it in the schedule. I know one character that I quite like and is quite popular, a character called Eternal Warrior.
Right.
He doesn't tend to have that many of his own runs. He's had two of his own runs, and they've both been quite small, and he doesn't get that much attention. And then, that's personally, I do wish they'd publish maybe a couple more series a month, not too many more, not like 10 more or whatever, but 2 or 3, just to maybe give some more focus on certain characters that they maybe haven't done so yet that are quite popular.
Do you think that's something that might happen? Because I'm thinking if they're going to get sort of movie money injected into it, or quite often it can be, testing. Well, it can work 2 ways. It can either be let's put out this book because we're thinking about doing a movie with this character,
mm-hmm.
or this character popped up, even small role in a movie, but everybody loved them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's quickly make them, give them their own book. You think of characters like Harley Quinn that
mm-hmm.
wasn't really a huge character at one time, and then just suddenly exploded
is now huge,
and is too huge, really.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm glad we're on the same page there.
But it could happen a similar thing. I imagine they're going to put up the character. Surely they're going to try and weave in different characters, even if they don't necessarily belong in that movie, but just as kind of a little Easter egg, a little nod to the fans.
Yeah.
And you never know who the fans or who the general public just for some reason are drawn to.
Mm-hmm. And a little bit of that can be seen with a character you might have heard of called Faith.
Yes, definitely heard of her.
She is one of Valiant's most popular characters, and I understand why, but at the same time,
you don't like
why?
Her. Is she? Correct me if I'm wrong. She like the kind of the fan girl that got superpowers. Is that?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So she was a comic nerd, and then she gets superpowers. She gets the ability to fly, and and then she started off in a series called Harbinger, and she's kind of blown up since then. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is a fan of Valiant about how she's. I don't dislike the character, but one of the things that makes me kind of dislike her is she manages to find her way into a lot of Valiant books. Since the 2012 reboot, she was in Harbinger, she was in Armor Hunters, the event, and then she went into being in Unity and Harbinger Renegades and Archer and Armstrong sometimes, and she's getting a new series called Faith Dreamside, and she was also had a mini-series called Faith and the Future Force, and she had her own series called Faith, and it's just there are other characters that are arguably more interesting that should possibly be getting some more focus, or just characters that you haven't done that much with.
Yeah, and I suppose if you've got, as you're saying, if this was Marvel or DC, go ahead, make 50 books, we don't care. But if you're only publishing a very limited number of books at any time, giving that much attention to one person, I suppose, you really are stealing the limelight from other characters.
From a business standpoint, if it sells, it sells. That's just how it is, and that's fair enough. I understand how she would appeal to people. I think with Valiant, they don't really sexualize their characters, and which is something that gets called on quite a lot in other comics, and Faith is a good example of that because she's realistic, really. She's as the article about her film that's being developed called her plus size. So
Right.
you know, she's
Delicately worded there.
Yeah, I don't, because I don't want to offend anyone. But you know, she's more realistic, and I feel like that is one of the things that makes her so like endearing to a lot of people, is because like, you know, she's not this hourglass, you know, busty. Yeah, she's
a normal human. Who can
and
fly.
she represents, you know, maybe what a lot of fan base might be like, and you know, if you can relate to a character, then that, you know, you can probably enjoy their stories a lot more.
Yeah,
so,
and I suppose the fact that, I mean, a lot of this probably comes from it being a more modern character, in the sense that it's a new character created like this, because the issue that the other publishers have is that they try to do similar things, but they do it with characters that already existed, and so of course then there's backlash of people saying, well, why have you changed this character this way, or, you know, you've changed this one's race, or this one's appearance, and then of course people that object to that get called out on, you know, oh, you don't like this kind of thing in your comics, and it might not be that. It might be that, as we said, everybody is somebody's favorite character. So, well, this was my favorite character. I've got all this merchandise of them, and now that doesn't look like them anymore. And of course, it causes a lot of controversy. But being able to say, well, we didn't have a character before, we've made this new character. This is what they look like. This is what they do. I guess they have a degree of freedom in that sense.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, you know, I'm when it comes, you know, I'm all for diversity in comics, 100%. But I understand where people come from, where it's like, why change these beloved characters? Like, just make new ones.
Yeah,
that's all it is, and then bring them into the limelight. You have the control of who gets the focus. Whether they sell or not is up to. Obviously.
Well, again, as you said, how good are the stories? I mean, if you really want to do it, you take your best writers, you tell them, look, we want a character that's like this. Make us a character. We'll give you the support. We'll put the book out there. We'll, you know, understand that maybe the first couple of issues aren't going to sell as well as putting out a new Batman book, but don't worry about it. You've got our support. We understand, and let's see if we can, you know, get this character out there. And it has worked at times.
Exactly.
I think like the Miss Marvel book that really took off was a new character, very different from anything else.
What they did with that, I think, is very smart, because she has the relation to a beloved character. You know, Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, loads of people are fans of her, but she's her own character. Right? She's just a fan. You know, she's a fan of Captain Marvel. She's not taking over from Captain Marvel, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that works a lot better than maybe forcing a replacement or something like similar. Yeah,
which they've also tried to do.
Exactly.
And didn't work as well, as you said. So normally, at this point, we try to flip things around a little bit. I give you control of the conversation. So you can ask me some questions about your topic, that is Valiant, I'm going to say entertainment at this point. So I'll let you lead.
Well, I'm curious to know, what did you actually know about Valiant, / think about Valiant before I came on the podcast? Like, what was your kind of first impression, and what did you know about them?
So I probably didn't know that it had been reset so recently. I think at the beginning you mentioned that they'd kind of bought characters that already existed, in the very beginning, and I probably didn't make kind of a distinction between, okay, they had some characters at the beginning that had already, you know, been around for a long time, and then they had, I mean, obviously I had heard kind of all the thing about Faith when she came out, so I knew that obviously they were, of course, introducing new characters, but I didn't realize there'd been quite such a hard reset and sort of restart. I'd read a few of the books.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think you mentioned Quantum and Woody.
Yes.
I'm sure I read the first couple of issues of that where they sort of got their powers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually love that story. The first, is this the James Asmus run, 2012?
Oh, no, don't ask me detailed questions.
Well, is it like modern Quantum and Woody, or is it like 90s?
I'm going to say modern, yeah.
Then I love that first story arc. It's the only comic I've ever laughed out.
Because they're I'm trying to remember. When would that have come out? More or less
2012 or 2013.
It's not that long ago, but my memory is not brilliant on it. But I have a feeling like they are, I want to say like adopted brothers or like foster brothers.
Then yeah, that would be the more.
Yeah, and
That's when they quite changed.
And they kind of hate each other, but their powers force them together in some way.
Yeah,
they have to recharge each other or something.
Yeah, so every 24 hours, if they don't clang these bracelets together, they'll their atoms will like disintegrate or something silly like that.
Yeah,
it's just something to keep them together, basically.
To sort of force this. It's very like buddy cop kind of. You know this sort of the captains force these two guys together, and they don't like each other, but they've got to work together. It's like that concept, but bigger, sort of. Like,
yeah,
they really don't like each other, and they really have to stay together. I think I'd kind of, for some reason, is it Archer and Armstrong? Is that?
That is another series.
Yeah, I feel like that's cropped up from time to time for some reason. And I want to say he's very old, right? He's lived for a long time. Is that?
He is immortal.
Correct?
Yeah, he's one of the three immortal.
Kind of like a Hercules-esque character. Is that sort of the idea? Kind of like. And then the other guy's not. He's just a normal.
Yeah. So Armstrong is an immortal. He's very strong. He's also an alcoholic and a poet.
So he's exactly a Hercules type character.
I guess so. I don't know too much about it. Just between me and you.
Yeah.
And his sidekick Archer is this. I don't want to go into spoilers, but basically he was raised by a cult to be an assassin. How much did you read? Did you read any of Archer and Armstrong, or you just know?
I just feel like it's for some reason cropped up from time to time. I feel like I've read. I want to say even like panels of it. I don't think I even read an entire book. I just feel like, but weirdly more than once. Does that make sense? Like not even like I picked it up and I read a few and was like, this isn't for me. I just for some reason, I feel like it's cropped up from time to time, or possibly I've seen them in other. May even be that I've seen them in other Valiant books, like just appearing. Because I did try to read some of the bigger stuff, like the kind of the big events and stuff, because again, probably somebody recommended it. But
well, if I can recommend you a book, which is quite a good starting point. It's about 3 years into the reboot. It's a book called The Valiant,
right?
And it mostly focuses on the characters of the Eternal Warrior and Bloodshot, and it's super good. It's co-written by two of my favourite writers, Matt Kint and Jeff Lemire, and amazing art by Paulo Rivera, and it's just such a good book. Like, it's possibly my favourite comic ever.
Yeah. So, wow, high praise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I feel like I definitely would have had a look at Exo Manowar. Is that it?
Yeah.
I feel like I want to say there was a series that started. It's going to be. I have a feeling I was still living in Italy, so it's probably going back maybe 4 or 5 years now. But I want to say he was like on another planet at the time, and he was without his suit at the beginning. Yeah,
that sounds like the new one that started last year.
Was that last year? Wow,
I think so.
How on earth did I read that? I don't know. I feel like, but again, like I probably looked at the first issue. Did he have like a girlfriend that was an alien?
Yes, that's the 2017 one. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I've seen that, maybe first issue of that. So I've kind of, dipped my toe in a little bit just to have a look. But as I said, I'm kind of out of the comics game at the moment.
That's fair.
I've got. So let's throw him under the bus. So you said earlier about Harry, Marvel fanboy. He's amazing with Marvel.
Yeah,
he can tell you dates and issues and first appearances. But having heard him on other podcasts, I was surprised at his lack of knowledge about like DC comics, for example.
Honestly,
even of
you
like,
don't understand
I don't know
Tom
who that character is. And I was thinking, well, I can get like, oh, I've never read his book, or I've never followed him, or I don't know his relation to this character or that character, but I've never heard of that character. I was like, oh, that stings. I'm the opposite in that I probably know a little bit about everyone.
Yeah.
But I don't know dates, first appearances, anything like that. So, that's just me though. It's a bit like this podcast. You know, I'm having conversations with people on 100 different topics. We hope for 100 episodes. And yeah, a little bit of knowledge on everything, but not deep knowledge on anything. Let's put it that way. And
fair enough.
Definitely that comes through with Valiant. I've probably can picture nearly all the characters if you say the names, and I've seen them on the cover of a book, or you know, heard people talking about them and then Googled who they were talking about. But I have never I don't think I've read an entire arc of any Valiant story. Probably that might change.
What I think you should do personally is, I think when you eventually find yourself getting back into comics, you should pick one of the series that stands out most to you and just read it from beginning to end, because they're not too long. Most series tend to run for about 6 volumes in trade, which is around like 25 issues. But if you're picking that up in trades, I don't think that's too big of an investment.
Yeah.
And I think that might be for you, and maybe anyone. Just to look into their catalog and see what interests you the most, and then try it out, because I can almost guarantee you'll find.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying there's like a lot of variety there, so. No doubt. I've had, because I remember that, you know, like going back to Quantum and Woody, that was very much a comedy book. It was kind of a comedy book where they happened to have superpowers, as opposed to something like Spider-Man that is a first and foremost superhero, but he can be quite funny and quippy. But that's very much in the background of him being a superhero, and this is completely the opposite. It's first and foremost, this is a comedy, but they happen to be superheroes.
Or try to be.
Yeah. Even I think, if I remember correctly, like the one goes full on costume, and the other one is wearing like sunglasses.
Like,
is that
secret identity? No one can know my name. We're going to be superheroes, and then Woody's just turns up in like a dirty suit and sunglasses. He's like, "Yeah, I'm Woody," and it's so that. One of my funniest, my favorite recurring gags from that series is that like everyone sees Quantum Man, like, we know who you are because you're always with Woody. Like, it's obvious.
It's pretty much the logic anyone should be using on like Superman and Clark Kent, or Spider-Man, Peter Parker. They're kind of, well, hold on, you're always with this other person. You get great pictures of them. You've always got the interview. We know who you are, But in that case, it is just, well, you're always with the same person. Sometimes you're wearing a mask, sometimes you're not. But we know it's you. Yeah, I might. Maybe that's the one I need to go check in on again. Have a little look, see what I think.
I've heard the new current Quantum and Woody run is really good. So if you wanted to maybe check that one out, it's up to you. You got a couple to choose from. Yeah.
So. If people don't hear episodes for a couple of weeks, so I've gone on a deep dive back into comic books. But I'm actually looking forward possibly to this DC Universe streaming service and app, because I was like, oh, that might be a way to finally read some comics again. But no, I've just, it's kind of the time and the money and the investment that's the problem. How are the books priced in comparison to Marvel and DC? Is it similar prices? Are they slightly cheaper, slightly more expensive? It's pretty much down the line.
I can't speak to certainty with the single issues. I think they might be like DC price, which is a little bit less than Marvel. But I can't. That's just. I think that's mostly just an assumption.
Yeah.
However, the trades, a thing that I like that they do. Do you know what Image do with their trades?
No, probably not.
They'll price the first volume cheaper than so I think it's like $9.99 USD, so that translates to like I think it's £9 retail,
right?
And Valiant do that, so you can actually get like brand new copy of like the first volume of most of the series for like £7.
Okay, and then
so it's
the next volumes are going to be slightly more, but
the next one would
kind
be
of
like
you know that you want it at that point. Yeah. I think because when I was living abroad, I was buying a lot of trades, and this is even why I ask, because I remember, even though I prefer DC, I bought a lot more Marvel just because it was so much easier to find, it's like maybe a used copy or secondhand or something like that. But I could find Marvel books so cheap, and all the DC books really retained their price and value. And and so I've got a huge stack of Marvel graphic novels and trades just because they were cheaper to buy than DC ones. And there's like a few DC ones that are like, oh, I really liked this book, so I was willing to pay for it. But yeah. Anyway, and then but then I was trying to do single issues, but it's
so expensive. Honestly,
it's impossible as well to, because again, I kind of want to read everything, even the things I don't like, and I find myself
that's
forcing myself through.
Yeah, that's the struggle of being like really into comics. It's like I want to read everything, but I can't. I literally can't. I don't have the money or the time or anything, but I want to read it all. Yeah,
and it's because you never know when it's going to serve its purpose. So it's like, the next big event, and suddenly some characters involved, and I'm like, I don't know anything about them. So you try to kind of keep up on everything, but it's impossible. You just can't, unless you've got a comics podcast where you can justify it. Maybe. Yeah. Oh, anything else you want to ask me, or is that it for my knowledge of Valiant?
Which character that you know of interests you the most out of the Valiant characters that you're aware of and that I've possibly mentioned? I
think I'm trying to think, because you've mentioned a couple that I'd not really heard of, so there are a few that I might have to. Well, I'm going to edit this, so when I go back and listen, I'll maybe take some notes. But I don't know. I think probably, as I said, I'm going to have a little look at Quantum and Woody, maybe, just because I think where I am at the moment in life, I'd like a nice light read as opposed to going too deep. But I might be intrigued to see some of these, like maybe the one some of the kind of more. I think I'm going to use my time and energy in the sense of like, well, this is going to be more value for getting to know the majority of characters in a shorter period of time. So perhaps kind of a book where it's going to be like a mini event or something that's incorporating some different characters.
Or maybe a book called Unity might be a good idea then, which is kind of like their team book.
Yeah. Because I think I feel like I've done similar things with like Avengers and Justice League and Teen Titans and ones like that, where I've read a team book and then been like, all right, who's this character? Because they seem cool. They're really interesting. I like their power set, or I like and then sometimes you read their solo book and you're like, well, that's terrible. That's because it's going to depend on the writer and the way they approach it. And sometimes you're like, wow, no wonder they brought them up to the team, because this character's great. So Unity, you said, is their team? Yeah. Okay, so I've got a few things to keep my eyes open for, to have a look for, but let's see.
Definitely do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as well to see what happens. So the only question that I've got left is, because you mentioned the Harbinger series that's going to be a movie. What's that? Just ask as a final question.
The film specifically, or Harbinger?
I'm going to go the more general concept of Harbinger.
Well, Harbinger, the way it was sold to me is it's kind of like Valiant's X-Men, which is odd because I don't like the X-Men and I really like Harbinger.
Okay.
So Harbinger is about these people called Psiots. Psiots are like mutants, basically. They have powers which can range from telekinesis to I think it's called like electrokinesis, pyrokinesis, techno, all sorts, right? All sorts of different powers. And it follows the main character called Peter, who is one of few people who are born activated. I think there's like 3 in the whole world, and they are like immensely powerful. But he's a teenager and he doesn't know what to do with his powers. And, he sees them as a burden. He hates them. And he's approached by a man called Toya Harada, whose powers were activated in the Hiroshima bombing.
Right. Okay. So like generally, there's a trigger. There's something that's going to set them off.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So it's quite dangerous to if you're trying to attempt to, because there's people with no powers, people with dormant powers, and then activate people, right?
Right.
And it's quite dangerous to try to activate someone. So let me just explain. This man, Toya Harada, he has this thing called the Harbinger Foundation, which is where he trains psyops to, use their powers and gives them a home and a safe space and all this. And he is activating psyops, but the way he does it, there's only a 1 in 4 chance that they will actually get powers. And there's a 3 out of 4 chance that they'll die.
Oh, great odds.
So, yeah, so he's actually the villain, Toya Harada.
Right. But he's positioned as... Is it clear that he's the villain from the beginning, or is he sort of positioned as the Professor X type character?
He's kind of... You see throughout the first volume a slow descent into, like, his facade kind of starts to clear towards the end of the thing, and then you realize, he's the villain. And Peter ends up fleeing the Harbinger Foundation, almost dying in the process, and is saved by Faith, who those two then go on to make a team called the Renegades. Because Peter, the reason Toya Harada wanted Peter is because he can activate psyops. So Peter goes around, activates his own psyops, and makes his own team to fight back against Toya Harada. And it's I didn't think I'd like it that much, and it's possibly the most consistent series of all of them that I read. Like, it's the most consistently well written, just really good book. So yeah,
that's an interesting. I can see where the parallels to the X-Men come in there. I would say as well, though, with the idea of people having to be activated and being kind of, you might have this dormant thing but you don't know, and there's a degree of chance. It's also quite similar to the Inhumans and the whole thing they did with the Terrigen mist that was going around, and just activating people, and who knew what was going to happen to you. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. I quite like the positioning, what might seem to be the mentor kind of character really having his own, because quite often even with ones like Xavier, you might think he's a good guy, but I'm not so sure about some of the things he's doing. Some of these decisions seem quite self-serving, and maybe not always in the best interest of the other people. So having that kind of dialed up to 11 and really being the bad guy, I think that's probably the one that's intriguing me the most. I might actually have to have a... So that was Harbinger, correct. You said? Harbinger,
yes. Yeah. And Toya Harada is actually one of my favourite Valiant characters, because I say he's the villain, but he's very moral grey. He does quite bad things, but he does them to try and make the world a better place.
Yeah. So he can view himself as the good guy. He's not your kind of cackling mad scientist. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. See, that I quite like that. I suppose, again, being newer, it gives you that ability to have, because I would say that's a more modern storytelling trope now.
Yeah.
If a movie comes out and it's like, this is the bad guy, he's clearly the bad guy, look at him laugh as the children are suffering. People go, oh, this villain is very one-dimensional. There's no I couldn't sympathize with his reasonings in any way. Whereas I think people like that now. They want to be able to say, well, yeah, it's true, he's a bad guy, but he was doing it what he thought were the right reasons. And so I suppose, again, because you've got your Lex Luthors and your characters like that are really almost painted into that corner of, well, they're the bad guy. Why? They always are. They just...
Yeah.
That's how they are. And you think, well...
And that's not really human. There's not... Most people... There's exceptions.
Yeah.
But generally, people aren't all evil.
No, they don't. Or if they are, they don't view themselves
there's a reason.
as evil.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that does sound like an interesting one. I might have to have a quick look and see, especially if that is going to be something that's going to come out as a movie, and might
be prepared.
Maybe be be in on the ground floor before it really takes off.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, again, you're talking about like Sony having trouble with movies. So the X-Men movies that Fox have been doing have not really won them any favors. So if there was like what some might consider to be like, well, that was just a good X-Men movie, that would be high praise for Harbinger.
Like how people say The Incredibles is
the best Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah.
I'm so annoyed that I couldn't see that because of the World Cup.
Yeah, it comes out as we're recording this. Actually, I probably shouldn't say that, should I?
That's all right. There's no secrets here. I'm sure I've revealed it a number of times.
Comes out this Friday, so I'm actually going to see that this weekend. Incredibles 2. I'm excited.
Oh right, really? I might try and take my son to see that, because I was just thinking, this would be a wonderful movie for him to go and see, and then the World Cup happened. So as we've revealed that we are recording this during the World Cup, I have literally just opened up my browser. So considering you're my only kind of English guest I've had in the last couple of weeks, and we decided to record during England playing in the World Cup, any guesses on the final result?
2-1 to England.
No, you've got the right numbers.
Oh no, really?
2-1 to Croatia.
Oh no. Oh. And is that full time?
Same full time here, yeah. Just trying to see. Well, don't know what it says there, but okay. Well, so that was more enjoyable doing a podcast than watching England lose in the World Cup. Very good. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Luke. We really appreciate your making time to be here and to educate us on Valiant comics, and getting a lot more time to do it than Harry had on his episode. So
take that, Harry.
Yeah. So I think maybe some people will be heading out to the shops to see if they can pick up a Valiant book.
Hope so. I really hope people at least give Valiant a chance. Try one thing, and if you don't like it, fair enough. But at least give it a try.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Stop throwing your money at Marvel. They've got enough. They've got Disney money now. They don't need your money.
Yeah, exactly.
So we mentioned at the outset that you've got your own podcast that is Elsie's Comic Corner. I imagine you're also on Twitter and Instagram and things like that. Yeah,
well, I have Twitter at LC_comics. I actually have a YouTube channel as well, just called LC Space Comics. Like, search that in YouTube. I make videos about comics. I've done a few videos about Valiant. You know, I don't just do Valiant. Don't worry. There's all sorts on there. So if you want to check me out on there, make sure you head over to Elsie's Comic Corner. So yeah, definitely come on over and have a listen.
Great. Obviously, for us here at Conversation With, we made some changes recently, and this is the first podcast I'm recording since we've actually made the changes. So if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes and wondered why I'm talking about podcasts that don't exist anymore, or why the feed looks different, I can explain now. So we've just merged the two different podcasts we had together. So now on A Conversation With, you're going to have this main series that's coming out every Wednesday, where I have a different guest from a different part of the world with a different topic, and then throughout the week there'll be some bonus episodes where it's either speaking with my wife or with my son, or we're still doing our episode by episode review of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, but we're doing that also on this feed of A Conversation With. So it's been renamed A Conversation With Lois and Clark. So that's all still happening. If you want to contact me at all, you can do so at aconversationwithpod@gmail.com. Our Twitter and Instagram is ACWpod. We've also got the Patreon, that is patreon.com/aconversationwith, if you want to support the show in that way. That's I guess the end of our discussion on Valiant. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episodes. Possibly this one and the last one have been slightly longer, so if you're enjoying the longer format, let me know. If you wish we'd stop talking sooner, you can also let me know. I'll be a little bit offended, but we can adjust future episode lengths to make you happy. And that's all from us. We'll just say goodbye.
Bye.